Over the past few weeks, you guys have seen me take my 800 horsepower beautiful STI, strip it all the way down, and build an absolute menace of a twin turbo Subaru. This is something that I haven't ever seen in person. There's a few of them out there, but I drew this up in a sketchbook and I said, Silas, let's make this thing happen, and that's exactly what we did. This thing came out freaking beautiful. I consider it a work of art. I'm super proud of it. And in the last video, you guys got to hear it start for the very first time. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I just got back home. We're in the garage with Panzer, and we have a lot of little things we got to button up on this. So for starters, on the table here we have an iWire battery relocation kit. This is actually for an 04 to 07 STI. Found it on Marketplace pretty cheap, so I don't think there's much differences between the 04 to 07 and the 08 plus STIs. It's just the mount is probably a little different, but either way we have to make modifications to it, because your normal mount would mount to the side of the fuse box here, and obviously with the turbo sitting in its place, we're gonna have to find a new mount anyways, so not too worried about that. And then also my buddy Remy, you guys probably all know Remy, he's gracious enough to send over his old Boomba throttle body that he had on his 1000+ horsepower STI, and we're gonna be able to use this to replace the stock one that I've been running on this since I built the car. So huge shout out to Remy for sending that over. Hopefully we can get it knocked out. First thing we got to do is pull out this turbo on the driver's side. That way we have all the room in the world to do this battery relocation. So let's get this thing yanked for the 4,032nd time. With our turbo and our wastegate dump now removed, I've gone ahead and unboxed our iWire battery relocation kit. Now, this is the post that's going to be sitting in the engine bay that I was talking about. This, I think, is the only difference between the 04 to 07 STI and then the 08 Plus. Besides, I think, maybe like a ground or a power wire that comes out of the fuse box. Something little like that. But we're going to have to make a modification to this anyways. Like I said, typically, this will sit on the side of the fuse box somewhere in this area here. But I think I want to locate this somewhere over here on the side of the strut tower, nice and clean, out of the way, and away from most of the heat, I should say. First thing we have to do is remove our power and ground cables that go to the starter from the battery. So we'll take this nut off, separate these two cables here, and then we should be able to trace these back to the starter. There's also a ground cable right here on the side of the strut tower. That will come off, and we'll also pull that off with this entire harness. So it's going to be a little tricky because I have an intercooler pipe running through there now. But let's take the time, get that thing pulled off, and we'll be replacing it with some ground and power cables from the iWire kit. A couple minutes later, we got this harness pulled out. So this was the positive and the negative on the starter, and then this was our positive and negative terminal for the battery. And then this was the ground that just chilled behind the fuse box. So this comes out all in one piece. And if we look in here, we got a lot of room cleared out. But I've also mounted our little new post right here on the side of the strut tower. I just have one bolt in there right now holding it, but it's nice and sturdy. It isn't going to go anywhere as it is. And then this is our positive that comes out of the fuse box. So this also used to go to the positive that was on the battery. We just bent it straight, and now we can attach it to our power post here. I've also installed the little grounding kit. I'm not sure if you can see it kind of mounted down there. I went ahead, sanded down the paint on the side of the strut tower, and then we can just ground our box there. Essentially what this grounding kit does is takes 4 grounds from the engine bay and pulls them all into one grounding kind of bracket there that we can mount to the chassis, and then we have way stronger grounds throughout the bay. So one of the grounds pulls off of this strut tower here. I have another one pulling off the back of the alternator bracket, as the alternator actually grounds on that bracket. So now we have a ground pulling from there. We have a ground on the factory intercooler mount, which is way down there, right there on the side of the engine block, super tucked away and hidden behind the manifold. And then the last one goes to the manifold itself. I just have it tucked down on that last bolt in the corner. Typically that one would go to the top of the manifold if you ran a factory manifold, but because I have the ECU and everything grounded on my AVCS here, we have a pretty strong ground there. I'm not too worried. It's not getting interrupted at all. So I just went ahead, ran that one to the manifold. Not sure if it's actually doing anything, but I know the other 3 are, and you know, it's better than not having anything at all. Next thing we have to do is replace the power in the ground that we just took off the starter. So they supplied some new cables that essentially we're gonna run the power from that starter to the post that we installed, and then the ground's gonna go from where the ground was on the starter, kind of on that mount that gets sandwiched on the bell housing bolt. And then that's gonna run to a chassis ground that's kind of on the side of the frame underneath the car. So honestly, that is the exact location I was mounting my intercooler piping to. So we can probably sandwich it in between the 2 of those, or I can just mount it to another chassis ground under there. There's quite a few holes that are kind of covered off with a little plastic cover. You just pull that out and then you can zip an M8 or whatever into that hole, and then you're grounded. So I'll show you guys the cables, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and get them installed. It's really hard to film in there. It's really dark, really tight. So yeah. So it's these shorter guys right here. This is the starter side, so that's your starter ground. Starter power comes with a little boot to cover it up, as you're gonna have, you know, voltage from your battery right to the starter. And then this will be on the post, and this will be on the chassis. So I'm not a huge fan of the giant eyesore of this big red cover. Yes, I understand it's safety reasons. We're gonna keep it on there, but maybe if I can get a black one, it'll be a little less of an eyesore. I'm trying to get rid of anything red in this bay, so this I think I can just paint. And then same thing with that guy. I think when I put the new throttle body on, we'll try to clock it so that actually sits underneath, and then that'll get rid of all the red stuff in the bay. So whatever is back here, obviously that's where that big boot's gonna be. If we can see it behind the manifold, yeah, I'll probably just try to get a black one, and then I don't have to worry about it. Everything in the bay is now wrapped up. I have the power and ground coming around behind the fuse box. These will obviously get tucked away behind it. It'll look super clean. Runs down through the fender, and then now we'll run up over the fender into the car, and then it'll just run down the under the carpet, under our trim panels, right down here, and it'll go all the way back, kind of how we ran the fuel system, all the way to the trunk. So that's it. We just have power and ground to run, and then we'll install this circuit breaker back there. And then let me turn this brightness down a little bit. This will be your final cable from the circuit breaker to the battery, and then this is ground to battery. So my guess is we'll run this 12 volt all the way back. It'll go into the circuit breaker to battery. This ground will probably go down, ground to somewhere on the chassis or something in the trunk, and then this will go from that same chassis point to the battery. And then this last wire, this is fuse box to post. This is for the 04 to 07 model cars where they actually have power coming out of the bottom of the fuse box. We don't have that, so we don't need that wire there. But everything else we'll be utilizing. So let's go ahead, we'll get this run to the back of the car, and then we're almost done with this kit. So before I push through our power and ground, I am going to pull back the power for the fuel system because now we're going to run this straight to the battery, which is in the trunk rather than the engine bay. Alright, so I've gone ahead and cleaned up all the wires underneath the fender again, so those are all nice and tucked away. We don't want them getting cut up by the tire, and especially since I don't run inner fenders, you know, it definitely is a risk if we don't protect them in some sort of way. So those are tucked away, and then in the interior, I'm kind of a nut for clean wiring. So we have our power and ground coming and running down right through the floor here where our hardwire kit was ran. This will obviously get tucked up in there as well. And then coming into the back seat, same thing. Wires just follow along. And then right here, you can see where I took the power for our fuel system, turned it right back around, and then ran it straight back in here. Let me turn the brightness up a little bit. And then we get to the passenger side. And let me run over there real quick. I'll show you what we got. So now looking from the passenger side, all of our wires come around. The power for the fuel system was a little bit long, so I just looped it around itself, and then all of our wires feed up through the seat here, but still super clean along the back seat, just how we like it. And then looking in the hatch, we have our wires coming up. I have the grounds grounded right where the fuel system was grounded, so now we have 3 grounds hooked up here, 2 of which are coming from the car. The other one is that ground to battery wire that I was showing you guys earlier. So we have our ground coming all the way from the bay to here. We have our fuel system ground to here, and then the ground wire to the battery coming off, and that is right here. This will be right on the ground terminal once we get the battery mounted. And lastly, the power wire comes through this 120 amp breaker. So right now it is essentially tripped. Once you close that reset flap, now it is live. So I have it tripped just for now while we're setting it up. Not that it really matters, we have no battery in here anyways, but we can mount this kind of wherever you want. You got some 3M double-side sticky tape underneath. I'm thinking of putting it down here, but here's where we're at with our battery setup. I don't have a battery tray yet. Right now I'm literally just gonna set the battery in the trunk, hook it up, that way we can move the car around and do what we need to do. To be NHRA compliant, you have to have one of the J-hooks actually welded to the frame to, you know, hold the battery in place, which is kind of absurd, but I mean, it makes sense. Keeps the battery, you know, in place. You know it's not going to go anywhere if it's welded to the chassis. So we have to do that. I think once I go back up to Pennsylvania for Boxerfest, we'll jump in the trunk, weld a J-hook down there, and then be able to secure the battery like that. I just have to build a tray or order a tray, not really sure yet. For the time being, like I said, I'm just gonna plop the battery in the trunk, hook it up, and that'll be plenty good enough for us moving it into the trailer, out of the trailer, driving it down the road for a little ways. Ain't gonna hurt nothing, so let's go ahead, get the battery set up in there. The battery I did leave on the concrete because I didn't know that leaving a battery on the concrete kills a battery. Now I know, learned the hard way, so I might try to charge that. If it doesn't charge, we'll have to get a new battery, and then we can slap it in the trunk. Let's finish this kit up, and then we can move on to the throttle body. Interior is all back together. Looks super good. And I actually went ahead and pulled off the valve cover. I know I said we were gonna jump into the throttle body, but I realized that we have the little coolant lines on there that we need to barb together and essentially make a loop because the Boomba does not have coolant going through it. So yeah, I ordered some barbs and we'll get to that when they get here. But for the time being, pulled the valve cover off and we are going to be, oh, it's a little bright. We're gonna be drilling a hole here, putting a 10AN fitting right here on the valve cover, and that's gonna be our drain for the driver's side turbo. I got tired of trying to figure out how to get it to work with our filler neck. It's just, yeah, I couldn't get it to be downhill. It has to be 100% gravity fed, or else we're going to have oil built up. There's no pressure under the turbo when it dumps its oil, so if it's uphill, you're going to be smoking quite a bit. So my idea is put a hole here, put a 10AN fitting on there, and then we can just 90 out of here, and that gives us an extra probably 2 inches plus some distance, so I can actually run a longer hose rather than just literally like a 4-inch hose. That was going to be a nightmare. So I'm going to drop this off with Rodney tomorrow to weld that fitting on. But yeah, that's off. We are good to go there. This is actually my first time looking in this engine since I built it, and it looks mint. So obviously all I can see is the 2 cams, but yeah, I literally haven't been in this thing at all since I originally built it over a year ago now. And with all the abuse this thing takes, like, it's got to have over 300 pulls on it now, 45 plus pounds, boost. I have no idea how this thing's still alive. First engine I ever built in my life, right there. So yeah, I'm happy to say the least. Hopefully my new SD card gets here soon. I think Amazon's dropping it off sometime between like 5 and 10 tonight. If you guys remember the last video, I actually broke my SD card in the camera somehow. And the one I'm using now is only a 64 gig. And when you're recording 4K, it doesn't take long to fill it up. So I've been dumping it on the computer as I go. But yeah, it's annoying. So we got a terabyte coming in here shortly. Hopefully it doesn't take too awfully long. I also off camera went and replaced all the crush washers under and on top of this banjo, from the rubber ones to actual copper washers. So hopefully those won't leak anymore. Same thing on this side, did the same exact thing down there. And then I also tightened up our clamps on our coolant line because that was also leaking. So hopefully when we fire this thing up, we got no more leaks. That would be ideal, and we'll have a turbo drain on the driver's side so we can actually let this thing run for a little while. Now I gotta clean up the rest of the garage and get the Evo pulled in because it's out there getting poured on. You can see we literally got a puddle in the engine bay. So yeah, let's get that thing back in here. All right, it is a day later now, and I got a few things in the mail today. One being shorter braided lines for our oil feed. These are 10-inch instead of 12-inch. So I think it fits a whole lot better in that area. Also got a bunch of our fittings that we needed for our vacuum lines, and also the coolant line that used to go to the throttle body right there. So essentially just took those lines, made a loop. So it's going to come out of, I believe, the coolant crossover and then loop back into wherever it goes. I can't even remember, if I'm being honest with y'all. But I do know that the Boomba throttle body that Remy sent over does not have coolant in it, so we can essentially just get rid of those. So with that being said, we should be good to get this Boomba slapped on. I'm hoping it's going to be a clean fit and a clean install with our existing piping. There's not many more modifications we can make to it because of how tight it is in that area. So hopefully we got enough room. I know the Boomba is going to push it out a little bit, but I don't think it should push it out too much. So we should be okay. There's only one way to find out. Let's get this old one torn off and see if we can't make it happen. So what I'm doing now is drilling out the rivets that hold the cover on the factory throttle body. The Boomba you actually have to build and put together with your factory internals. So you're seeing here, I put the motor in, bolt that in there. There's actually a little wavy washer that sits behind it as well. And now we're just going to slap the gear in there, and then we can take our cover, get that pushed back on, and instead of rivets, we're just going to use little Allen bolts and get that thing on there. Then once that's on, I take this little cover off where our map sensor goes, and we're going to install our AEM 5 bar. Remy runs his under the manifold. I run mine on the throttle body. There's really no difference. It's a little cleaner to run it under the manifold, and I'll probably move to that at some point, but for now, we're just going to run it right on the throttle body as we've been doing for the past year. I think what I like most about this Boomba is that it's all O-rings and not these big old gaskets. Everything is just O-ring, and it's machined out in the throttle body for this O-ring to sit in there nice and clean. And it's yeah, it's really, really nice. So this flange will bolt to the back of the manifold, and then the throttle body will bolt to this flange using these outer holes. So let's get this thing installed. Hopefully it's not too fat. I do have the 3-inch flange on there, so we can run a full 3-inch coupler. And yeah, hopefully this thing will improve our performance, and now we don't have to downsize from 3-inch to 2 3/4. Boomba is now installed. She looks pretty freaking good back there. I do need to get another 3-inch clamp. I don't know. I thought I had some, but maybe not. But yeah, I do like this a lot better than the stock throttle body. Not only will it perform a little bit better, but it is all black and not crusty and looking old. So it flows really nice in the bay. Let's get a W Remy in the comments for sending that thing over. Huge help. I don't know why he would need that on his car. That's not even stage 2, but it's whatever. I'm happy to have it on this car. So yeah, if you know, you know. Thank you, Remy. It means a lot, and we'll put it to good use. So I'm calling it a night for tonight. I have some more parts coming in tomorrow that we can actually make some more progress on this thing. So I will see you guys then. Okay, last night I got the EBCS plumbed in. Kind of did that off camera because not a whole lot to show, but we got 3 vacuum lines coming nice and clean off here, running to both our wastegate and our compressor housing. And then same deal on this side. We got our lines coming down. I have them nice and clean up against the timing belt cover. And then we just run down, go to the compressor housing and to our wastegates. So that is good to go. Now I'm just waiting to get the valve cover back, and then we can get this turbo in, and we're pretty much there. Now, unfortunately, I got some really tragic news, honestly, and I booked a last-minute flight. I got to go up to Vermont for the weekend, and I probably won't be back till Monday. So, well, actually, I definitely won't be back till Monday because that's when my return flight comes in. So we'll get this thing buttoned up then, but yeah, the next video I put up is going to be a little bit different. Doing a kind of a little different thing for this scenario, and you guys will see, but yeah, that's pretty much all I'm gonna have for this one. I know we are pretty long and it was a little bit dry, just a lot of little things. We're at that stage where it's just pretty boring until we get this thing back on the road. So appreciate y'all for bearing with me. Once again, super stoked. This build is coming along, and I think we're one video away from getting this thing out driving. So I'll catch you guys in the next one, or I'll see you at Boxer Fest because we're gonna be there. But until then, peace out. See y'all later.